Hi, good afternoon. This is your favorite podcast, Cambrian Explosion, with your hosts, Yawer and Nabil.
Hello, hello. And this time around, we're taking a lighter course of action and we're talking about movies.
Yeah, we thought we'd give you all a break and talk about some fun stuff for a change. So, of course, we're going to talk about some pop culture stuff and some recent movies that we've seen and, what we think.
I think the really cool thing about movies is they often provide a vision into what's going to happen in the future,
Hmm.
how we imagine or believe the world to be. Some of it is reality and an extension of reality. Some of it is fanciful, but it's also an extension of our psyche and the things we want to see or believe, the stories we want to believe happen in the world. Um, and recently we've had some fantastic sci-fi movies made. I'm going to actually zero in on the Marvel stuff that's happened. Um, the past 20 years saw about 12, 13 movies made in the Infinity Arc. Uh,
More than 20. More than 20.
I
Oh, yeah.
lost count.
MCU, yeah,
Yeah,
for
the
sure.
MCU and um, that was I thought that was an excellent execution of filmmaking, storytelling, and of imagining what technology uh, and what the future might look like for us. What were your thoughts on the Infinity Arc?
Well, obviously, it was a huge journey. A lot of build up, a lot of payoff. Very interesting. Lots of twists and turns. For me, I enjoyed seeing those characters coming to screen in that way, and I enjoyed the fact that they consistently kept a high quality of storytelling. They made good movies. They made a lot of money, obviously, but they made crowd pleasing movies. They they got criticism. They got criticized by people like Francis Ford Coppola, some big names, artistic people. They said who said that it's not filmmaking, it's not an art anymore, it's a circus. And to me, my opinion is that movies are about enjoyment. It's about escapism. It's not always about reflecting reality. It's about, I think, reflecting a different reality, maybe a deeper or, like you said, uh, uh, a subconscious reality, a zeitgeist, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. I
Of
think that word zeitgeist is a
yeah,
fantastic word
yeah.
to describe this. In effect, there's always the artistic interpretation of how something should be done, and you need to do something innovative, etc.
Mm,
But on top of that, there is the element of just telling a story well without thinking about the artistic aspects of it, as well as, and a story is told well when it can commercially do well. We know in movies that there are movies that are made with a lot of budget, but the story isn't told well, it's not understood, and the movie flops. So part of the Infinity series, the whole arc, the whole MCU, is pretty much all the movies made really good money, and that speaks, in my opinion, volume to them being able to speak the language, speak the psyche of what the general population is feeling, and how they are, where they are in their present state.
yeah, I mentioned crowd pleasing movies before. Crowd pleaser. Um, it's about like did did some of those movies make people in the audience cheer and shout and laugh and cry? And yes, they did. I mean, the scene in Endgame where, spoiler alert, you see the hammer,
Hmm.
you know, lifting into the air, and then it flies, and you see the who is catching it. Captain America just caught the hammer, and people went wild because those movies, the audience went wild. They had done their homework and they had set up
Mm.
those kinds of scenes, and when that payoff happened, like, it was a crowd pleaser. Like, I don't remember that kind of crowd pleasing moment in cinema history in all the time that I've been going to movies. That was a standout for me.
And it's worth comparing what Marvel has been able to achieve in terms of the MCU over a period of years, almost a decade plus. And when you compare it with the failure of DC to do so, so I do want to. I mean, some of the movies aren't the greatest movies in the world in the MCU. In fact, I'll say there are some DC movies which overall, as a standalone movie, sometimes is better than the Marvel movie as a standalone movie. But when you look at the whole universe and the context in which the Marvel movies live in, there is, over time, they have built so much IP and so much storytelling and narratives. And if you're involved in it, there is so much more weight, yet the movie itself is kept lighthearted.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, they take the time and effort to they go to the trouble of setting up certain storylines or characterizations, and then they reap the rewards of that by having the payoff which delights the audience, like I mentioned earlier. um, and they kept this tradition going with the Spider-Man, the last Spider-Man movie, right? No Way Home. What they did, they didn't just get the payoff from the MCU itself. They got the payoff from the setups that had been done by previous incarnations of Spider-Man movies. And the way that they achieved that, it's a masterstroke of storytelling, marketing, campaigning, making business deals in back rooms with Sony and Marvel and Disney, and getting them all to agree on these deals, and then finding the artistic vision. It's like forging together a new element out of all of these different parts.
I'm going to judge you on this question. The answer on this one really matters. Okay.
Okay.
Which Spider-Man was your favorite?
Which Spider-Man was my favorite?
You got to
You
see
mean,
all of them together. I'm
yeah.
including the piggy Spider-Man in there.
Ah, yeah, you know what? All of
Well,
them together, right? Okay, so obviously there was Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man,
yes.
2001, 2002. Um, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man. And of course, Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Finally, of course, there's Miles Morales' Spider-Man, right? And into the Spider Verse and the upcoming Across the Spider Verse. So to me, I feel like, and this is actually interesting because probably Tom Holland Spider Man, because I felt like they were trying to achieve something a little bit different from the
Uh-huh.
usual Spider Man template and formula.
Yeah.
The usual template of Spider Man is that he's this kid who gets powers and he wants to do the right thing, but he has a really difficult life. He's a pretty downtrodden, and, like, almost in a way, he's mm, he gives up a lot. He sacrifices a lot of his life to be able to do this kind of to bear the burden that he feels of his responsibility,
Yeah.
uh, because he feels the weight of the power that he's been given every day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. It sticks really well to
yeah,
that adage that is in there, with great responsibility.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
With great power comes great
yeah.
responsibility. There
I'm,
must
I'm
also
really
come.
my mind sometimes is like a
Hmm.
goldfish mind. I can never remember these things in the
Yeah, yeah,
right order.
exactly. No, but my point is that with Tom Holland Spider-Man, the MCU Spider-Man, they went in a slightly different direction. They said that what if Spider-Man Peter Parker was like, what if he was discovered by Tony Stark and became his like protege and
Yeah,
went under his wing,
yeah.
kind of, to be
They're
the next Tony Stark,
they're evolving the story, right?
or they tried to.
Yeah,
They
they
tried
tried
to.
to. Yeah.
Um, So while that was happening, I was like, you know what? This has a lot of potential because Spider Man as a character and as a power in the MCU, in Marvel Comics, he's often overlooked, but he has a lot of potential because not only does he have the brains and smarts of Tony Stark, but he has the battle prowess of Captain America. So he's like the merging of both of the worlds, the brains and the brawn.
I also feel that from a storytelling perspective, it's a genius move because you know a lot of the other characters are older in age as compared to Tom Holland, who's
Mm.
coming in, who's a high schooler, and part of
His
part
character, yeah,
yeah part of the marketing piece of it is you want to be able to appeal to different age groups and audiences, and you know a child wanting to look like one of the grown up heroes is one thing, but
mm.
being able to relate to a kid who's high school, so it brings in a whole new dimension
Yeah,
to the storytelling, which the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man maybe didn't have, or he just didn't look that high schooly as
yeah,
compared to how high schooly Tom Holland looks. Having said that, I grew up with the Tobey Maguire one,
same, same.
so for me it was just,
Mm.
oh, Toby's back.
Mm. Exactly, exactly. Yeah, for me too, it was like something out of like beyond my wildest imagination. I mean, you hear whispers of it, that kind of stuff that might happen, but you never think that they'll be able to pull it off. And when they did pull it off, it was like, oh my god, they pulled it off. That was crazy. But yeah, so Tom Holland Spider Man, he was being um, mentored by Tony,
Hmm.
and after Endgame, that whole thing became so much more poignant, but also the obviously he no longer had this shelter of this mentor figure to look out for him, and he was on his own. He became basically uh, he suddenly had to find his own footing, and he made mistakes. The movies showed the mistakes, and he tried to do the right thing. But ultimately, at the end, what that trilogy did was it sent him back into square one with the same old standard formula of Spider-Man is this poor kid who has a great power and he feels a great burden of responsibility, and he scrapes together enough money and he just goes by living in the like in very like um as very very meager, very modest life, while he pours all of his the rest of his as much of his income as possible into being Spider-Man.
Yeah, I think it's also a great bookender to the and a nod
Mm,
to the Infinity arc,
mm,
in a way that it says goodbye to
mm,
the whole Iron Man, because I feel
mm,
part of the whole story around Infinity arc was
mm.
so Iron Man driven,
Absolutely, absolutely.
and it's a great nod as a goodbye to that, and passing on the torch to the new
Mm.
arc that started. And so,
But I feel like, isn't Spider-Man supposed to be part of the new arc, the new generation of Avengers? He became an Avenger. He's a young hero. He's gonna grow up, but in the meanwhile, there are other young heroes as well, but he's should be one of them. And now that he's out in the cold, nobody knows who he is. He doesn't have any money, any access to Stark Tech. He is basically at square one, and he's at the bottom again. And how is he going to be back into the center of the action of the next saga? That's what I'm wondering.
And
Like,
that's I
that's my
think
question.
that's a great question. That's not for me to answer. That's for you to watch the movies to see, right?
True. This
That
is true. This is true.
that's what makes it, I think, such a great
Mm,
bookender to the
mm,
Infinity series, because
mm,
it just sets up
mm.
the next arc with such great questions around storytelling.
Yeah, it's a big question, right? It's a big question mark.
You want to see the movie to actually see, like, okay, now how do they solve some of
Mm,
these issues? How do they and
yeah.
and I think,
Like I'm thinking, like, did they make a mistake? Is this some kind of a huge plot hole that they'll be forced to retcon or somehow change the explanation? Like the MCU, the saga, or the different movies, they have not been without their plot holes, right?
oh yeah.
There were mistakes made, or explanations that were never given.
Keep in mind that, the Tom Holland Spider-Man has met with Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange is associated with the Avengers, so
Mm,
there is an element of connections, but actually throwing him in the dark like this allows for a whole set of movies to be
mm,
made where they can show the personal growth of Tom Holland. And when he comes back into the whole setup, you believe in a Tom Holland that has grown and does belong
mm,
in the actual Avengers universe, because you've
mm.
seen him do things on his own. You trust him.
He's earned his stripes by being he's been through trial by fire
Trial by
by
fire.
not having any.
Which, by the way, brings us to one of the topics that one of the reasons we picked this topic
Yeah.
is that there are actually, even in filmmaking, there's a technology of storytelling. There's
Mm-hmm,
a framework and structure to how storytelling is done,
mm-hmm,
and and one of the famous storytelling structures, which you shouldn't use this as a writing prompt, I mean, but it's a great way to analyze stories, is the hero's journey, and being able to see the different stages that each hero goes through in
mm,
in in um, being able to develop as a character. So Tom Holland Spider-Man has a call to action, needs to meet a mentor, um, meets
Tony Stark.
Tony Stark. Then he is supposed to fail at something in the
Mm,
hero's journey and go into a dark area where he needs
mm,
to rediscover himself,
mm,
and then find his way back, and then he will face the same problem but in a new light, and he will
mm,
have a new answer to that and be able to overcome his problems
mm.
and grow as a character. So that's the hero's journey for Tom Holland over here.
Yeah, in the first Spider-Man movie, what you just described is like word for word. I can associate that entire description with the parts of the movie, right? Spider-Man: Homecoming,
Yeah.
the call to action, the initiation into the new world, the failure, and the attempt of redemption, and then finally overcoming the problem and reaching his goal. Yeah, you can definitely correlate each of those sections into the movie and see exactly. It's very formulaic in a way. Marvel MCU, they've been working off of this formula ever since the Pixar days
Yeah. Yeah.
of Toy Story.
Yeah.
And you can't blame them. It's work for them.
Well, that's the thing. It's if done well, and I think, segueing into the next couple of movies that we've seen,
Hmm.
like, for example, Ant-Man and the Wasp, right?
Right. So Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania is the next big movie, and it's the first big movie of Phase 5, I believe, right? And
Yeah.
that's a setup, which is supposed to initiate us into this new multiverse
Yeah.
saga.
Yeah. And we saw that movie about a month ago when it came out.
Right.
And we had this discussion right after we saw the movie where we were talking about the hero's journey.
2 months ago now.
2 months.
It's timestamp March, early March.
2
Wow.
months ago, yes. And we had figured out that every one of the characters had their own version of the hero's journey for themselves. Some more pointed than others.
Mhm.
But when you start seeing the hero's journey across each character, you see that the art in there is being able to subtly hide it by interlayering the different characters and their individual heroes' journeys. But the key characters in there will all have their journey covered in some way or the other and pointed out.
Yeah, I think you were pointing this out earlier, which is that there are multiple variations of the hero's journey, which were used in this story, in this movie,
Yeah.
for the different characters. And at first glance, it might not look like this character is undergoing a hero's journey. But if you look deeper at the character and what they're going through, then you can kind of correlate them to the hero's journey formula, which is interesting. Like, it's almost as if the writers thought through each of these characters and said, how can we make this character have a hero's journey in this formula?
Yeah.
But at the same time, how can we change it up so that it's not totally obvious?
Well, I don't know how Hollywood writers are writing this right now, but I have seen writing rooms where they'll have a big billboard where the hero's journey is already mapped out,
Right.
the different phases of it.
Right.
And on the row side, they'll start putting different characters and they'll put the different scenes where each step of the hero's journey is done. And the idea of doing that exercise is that you want every character to have his complete version of the hero's journey, at least some time to be given, even if it is a one line to indicate what it is.
Right.
Just so that it has a completeness. And when I say it has a completeness, we were talking about Tom Holland and the Spider-Man and how he resonates to a particular audience group. Every character is at the end of the day going to resonate with particular audience groups. They will see themselves in there. And if you're able to carry enough characters through the hero's journey, you can have a complex story, yet it is, for that particular individual person watching, it is simple because they relate to that character and they follow the story from that character's perspective.
It's satisfying in a very deep way because I feel like this hero's journey formula is there for a reason. It's been derived for a reason, and it satisfies something universal and human in the human psyche, that you want to see the process or the stages of this journey. It offers something that like we innately identify with and we root for these characters.
Let me add one more framework or one more tool or technology in there. Typically, hero's journey is used to analyze, but when writing, they use another framework called Save the Cat. Save the Cat is a book by a very famous author on script writing, which analyzes, just like the hero's journey analyzes myths, historical myths, to come up with a generic story form, which almost all myths fall into.
Right.
The Save the Cat analyzes movies to do that. And it ends up with very similar steps, like the intensity flow or what happens where is pretty similar to the hero's journey, but the hero's journey ends up being focused on the character, whereas Save the Cat ends up being focused on the plot. How are you traveling through the different plot points is done through the Save the Cat, and hero's journey is done to figure out the characters.
Right.
Now, when you're writing, you probably want to focus on the plot points, but when you're analyzing, if you've covered everything for that particular character, you probably want to use the hero's journey and remap the scenes from Save the Cat into, from the plot point perspective, into this kind of a structure.
Interesting. I didn't realize that there was multiple dimensions to this. I wanted to ask you one thing. Have you seen the She-Hulk TV show?
No, I have not seen the
Okay.
She-Hulk TV show.
But have you heard about it?
No, I have not.
Okay.
I follow less the comics and the TV shows than I do the movies.
Yeah.
I know we also were talking about the Loki TV show and how that was super critical in
Right.
in the telling of the new multiverse related stories. You know.
Yeah, Loki was instrumental in setting up the new multiverse saga, I would say. The new saga is all about, it starts with a very small Loki story. I mean, small in a way, in a sense, but then it connects to many other stories. But the reason I brought up She-Hulk is because there was a lot of dissatisfaction with the way that TV show unfolded. Characters, story advancement, character development, all of these things were criticized, not just by, you would think that, certain kinds of insecure men are criticizing a show that's about a woman, but it didn't feel like that to me. I mean, it felt like there was criticism from many people, just because of the way that the She-Hulk, the show developed and kind of skipped through many different problems and just kind of like waved them away and resolved everything magically.
Yeah.
I felt, now that I think about it, I see that the dissatisfaction, I'm realizing that it's to do with they didn't follow the hero's journey formula. Like they in the trailers, it seemed like they might roughly follow the formula, but in the show, as it turned out, they did not. And I feel like that's probably, like, people were saying that this is not what we've come to expect from Marvel, and they couldn't articulate it, but it was basically, I think, in retrospect, about the hero's journey.
It often is. I think it's not that I can tell this to you in a different way. In songwriting, we like the format verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, bridge, pre-chorus, chorus, song ends.
Right.
And sometimes we'll shorten that format with having no pre-choruses in there, but you will see that 70 to 80% of songs follow that format.
Right.
And there's a reason it follows that format. It's because it's a self-fulfilling kind of thing, that we expect it, so we like it. So when we like it, we expect it.
Yeah.
Give
the audience what they want.
Give the audience what they want. Having said that, there are some fantastic songs that have been made which don't follow that format.
Yeah.
So is it doable? Absolutely doable.
Yeah.
Is it easy to do? No. In fact, most of the people who end up writing songs which don't follow that format, Pink Floyd is an example of that,
Right.
have spent years learning the original format, crafted tons of good songs using that original format, and then learned to break out of that mold because the story allows them to do it and the
Right.
song allows them to do it. Now, that's the difference between having a, a really good artist who
Right.
knows what they're doing and have mastery over it
Right.
versus somebody, and this is what you often get. TV show writers are not film writers
Yeah.
because they're TV show writers.
Right.
They're great at writing TV shows, but TV shows, you don't expect to go in there and have that same experience of like, oh, in 1 hour, except if you're watching an HBO series like Game of Thrones, which did do
Right.
that, you know.
Uh, the writers, it's interesting you mentioned the writers. I believe some of these writers were the ones from actually Rick and Morty.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, Rick and Morty is even more interesting in that sense, right?
Yeah.
It is comedy is
Yeah.
so much more a different ball game where you're writing comedy first rather than story first. Rick and Morty is all about comedy first.
Right. I've never actually seen it.
You've never seen Rick and Morty?
No, I never have.
We should maybe start a podcast where we just sit and watch Rick and Morty and get your reactions.
Maybe.
Mute everything else
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just put your face over there.
I actually rarely watch those kinds of shows.
Yeah.
Maybe when I was younger, but nowadays I don't actually.
Well, I watched Rick and Morty when it originally came out,
Right.
and I've watched it throughout. It's a hilarious show.
Sure.
Uh,
I've heard great things.
but have you seen South Park or?
Yeah, and look, I've seen lots and lots of tons and tons of shows. I've seen Simpsons, Family Guy, South
Yeah.
Park.
Yeah,
I've seen I watched these shows for a long time.
So therefore,
But after a certain amount of time, the shows become very like Futurama. I saw for lots of episodes. They become very
repetitive.
Yeah, formula. It was the same formula.
And what I'm trying to tell you over here is
Yeah.
is they're writing comedy first.
Right.
So what they're trying to write isn't a long living, fantastic story that you'll remember,
Right.
which is what movies are trying to achieve.
Right.
What they're trying to write is, hey, I want to give you a laugh this week so that you show up next week to watch and get a laugh, right?
Right.
Which is a very different type of writing. The objective is different. The meaningfulness of a story is very different. It's a different art form.
Sure.
But I also bring this up because like I do songwriting. I know about screenwriting because
Sure.
as a songwriter, I imagine that I have this chops to actually screenwrite, and then I
Right.
try doing it, and I realize like it's one thing imagining it in your head; it's another thing executing it well. So when you
Yeah.
step from one type of doing something to another,
Yeah.
I'm sure those Rick and Morty screenwriters are great, and they might have a misfire and fire right the next
Sure,
time around.
sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it doesn't always translate when you try to do something new. Since we've been talking about songwriting, I wonder if I can segue this conversation just a little bit.
Yeah.
Still want to stay in pop culture, but I do want to talk or ask you about Gordon Lightfoot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Gordon Lightfoot, legendary Canadian singer, songwriter, passed away recently.
Yes.
He was, I believe, 84, something like that.
Yeah.
And he was obviously a Canadian treasure and a legend, and known throughout the country and throughout the world as well. And he was known to be kind of like an extraordinary songwriter, right?
Yes.
Have you kind of like listened to some of his music?
I have. And oddly enough, I have not listened to his music through him.
Uh-huh.
I grew up more on Eastern music than on Western music, so there's a lot of folk musicians that I'm not familiar with.
Right.
But I open mic, and when you
Yeah.
open mic, there's a few names that pop up often,
Right.
quite often, in terms of people doing covers.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Covers.
Sure.
Prine is one person who pops up quite often,
Uh-huh.
and Gordon Lightfoot would pop up quite often as well. So
Uh-huh.
there's some popular songs of his that that I've heard through other people performing those at the open mics.
Yeah.
And particularly since he passed away, it has been just fantastic to hear all the songs that people are doing as tributes to him. He's got some great songs in there, a great collection of songs, and you know,
Yeah, I've been listening to a couple of songs, and a couple of them stood out to me.
Yeah.
Obviously, one of the most famous ones is the song about the ship that he wrote, the wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
And yeah, like that song, like you were saying earlier about breaking the rules. Like I thought that broke all the rules. It's like six something minutes long.
Yeah.
And it's talking about factual events that are verified, historical events, and it's talking about a topic which normally songs don't talk about, this kind of thing, right? And about a ship that unfortunately gets caught in a storm and loses. All the crew members were lost at sea, not sea rather, on the lake.
And it's interesting. So segueing back this to movies. First of all, very sad loss that we've had. Just want to put in that, and good that you brought that on.
He was a legend.
Yeah, he was a legend. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Segueing back into movies, that's one of the things that I'm hoping to see out of the new arc that we are getting out of the MCU. Some of the movies, so we talked about Ant and the Wasp and Quantumania. You can see the relationships that they were building within the multiverse and in the different movies like Spider-Verse and this one approaching it. You can also see what they did with the Guardians of the Galaxy. By the way, what did you think of Guardian of the Galaxy?
Yes, of course. We should talk about that. So we watched Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, a few of us together. And obviously it was, overall a great movie, a fitting end to the trilogy with James Gunn as the director, with that current team. It really took the characterization to the next level. It was a story about surviving abuse, growing, and finding a new family, and it just shed and showed all of these characters in a new light. Made them all realize things about each other which they'd never realized before. Made them all grow as a family. I thought it was a pretty cool movie, pretty incredible movie.
The handling of the movie is a more mature handling. And Gordon Lightfoot was such a great songwriter. He was a master at his work. He could do that with that story, bring a story like that into his songwriting.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of maturity that you're talking about with Galaxy 3.
True.
Typically, the third in a franchise is often a horrible movie.
Yeah.
Godfather 3, who wants to watch that? Right?
Spider-Man 3.
Spider-Man 3, who wants to watch that?
Right.
So I thought that's one of the things that they pulled off really well. That I would say out of the 3 Guardian movies, there's the second one, which is...
Second one was the weakest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that this was... True. They handled the more mature topic around abuse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They handled it across multiple characters.
Yeah.
They handled it across... they were able to pass the flag on.
Yes.
Yes. So it was, I think, really well handled, but really well made.
It was the first movie, the first MCU movie that I remember being told in the form of that many flashbacks. Do you remember anything like that before?
I can't think of it.
Nothing comes to mind, right? Nothing obvious.
Nothing obvious comes to mind, but keep in mind there's so many.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean, there was judicious use of flashbacks in other movies, obviously, of course.
Yeah.
For example, Captain America: Civil War.
Yeah.
Flashback showed the Winter Soldier killing, Tony Stark's parents and getting the Super Soldier Serum. But those were very short, like just to give you a little bit of context. Nothing that advanced the story so much like this. It was felt like it was organically woven into the
Yeah,
story.
I thought flashbacks, and it really worked well in terms of almost all the characters got developed
Yeah,
well. I do think that I would have liked to. Adam Warlock was
yeah,
shown a little like somebody who's not really that smart.
yeah, yeah,
I think he could have been given a little more respect.
yeah, yeah. He
And
was basically treated as a bit of a side character or a
yeah,
very undeveloped character, perhaps.
yeah,
But he did have his redemption arc at the end of the
yeah. He still
of the
followed
movie.
the hero's journey
Yeah,
in
yeah,
some way or
that's
the
true. He was on a hero's journey.
right. So
Um, in a way, I guess you would say.
well, that's the thing, right? You can't give equal space to
Yeah,
everybody, but they did give enough space to almost all the characters to
right,
you know give the enough backstory, enough development.
right.
I did think that there were some things here and there which were like slightly cheesy,
Yeah,
but no movie is perfect.
sure,
So I give them dues on that. That sure, you guys, if a scene is not to my liking, so what?
sure.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, it's the movie offers a lot, and nothing is going to be 100% perfect. So I would say that it still rates very highly. I would say it's an 8 out of 10
yeah.
for me.
I would say the same. I'm,
Yeah.
I'm I'm curious. Like, what's the next one that's coming up? When should we be looking to book our tickets?
You mean MCU?
hmm I know the Flash is coming out from the
Yeah,
DC
from
side.
DC. Yeah, obviously that's a must watch for me personally, but we'll talk about that later as well. But yeah, MCU. Honestly, the next one that I remember seeing ads for is the Marvels in
Yeah,
November.
yeah, yeah. Miss the
The Marvels.
yeah. That's the next one that's
Yeah.
coming up. I think.
No,
So.
wait, sorry. If we are not talking about just the MCU, if we're talking about Marvel as a whole, then there is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. That's coming out soon.
Yeah. Uh. Okay. So
Yeah.
there's a couple of movies coming out.
Yeah.
I'm actually curious as to the timeline that they have for the. And maybe what we should do is we'll put that timeline. We'll find it and put it in the show notes.
Sure.
So do check out our show notes if you want to see what's coming up next.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a good closer for the show as well. So
That's a good segue.
yeah. So we'll connect 2 weeks from this episode to talk about another new interesting topic for you guys.
Thanks for listening
Take care.
and take care.
Bye bye.